Good morning, bache. Welcome once again. Today we shall be learning something absolutely new. पिछली दफ़ा अगर आप लोगों ने वीडियो लेक्चर्स अटेंड किए हैं तो आपको पता ज़रूर होगा कि हम लोगों ने लिटरेचर के पार्ट में प्रोज किया था या फिर स्टोरी किया था समर ऑफ द ब्यूटीफुल वाइट हॉर्स. ठीक, टुडे वी शैल बी डूइंग द फर्स्ट चैप्टर फ्रॉम द पोइट्री सेक्शन. ओके, नाउ पोइट्री के बारे में डिस्कशन करने पहले या फिर ये जो हम लोगों का पोएम है जो हम आज पढ़ने हैं, ये पोएम पढ़ने से पहले बिफोर delving deep into the subject matter per se, I would like to introduce you to a little bit of a technical aspect of how to deal with poems or poetry per se. Firstly, let me tell you that poetry or poems, to read, understand, analyze, and then give your own comments or give your own understanding in writing about a poem or a piece of poetry requires or demands the basic understanding of quite a few different factors, which is really important in poetry. Firstly, आप सबसे ये कहना चाहूँगा कि किसी भी पोएम को पढ़ने से पहले या पढ़ने के दौरान तीन चीज़ें हमेशा ध्यान रखें. There are three things which you always need to keep in mind when you read a poem. Number one, it's called as the theme. Okay, now when you're talking about the theme of a poetry, you can go ahead and use a word if you like called as the meaning or the summary, or let us say how do I tell you, the crux, है ना. एक पोएम कुछ और नहीं बल्कि एक कहानी ही है जो कि एक कविता के माध्यम से या फिर probably if I try to explain it to you further in a very simple way, probably musically explain किया जाए, उसको हम कविता कहते हैं. ठीक, बहरहाल ये और बात है कि सारे जो कविताएं होते हैं वो सब के सब तो गाए नहीं जाते. All poems are not necessarily composed for the sake of performance. Having said so, a poem, like I told you at the outset, is nothing but a story being told in an ornamental fashion, correct? Which may or may not involve music, but at the same time, it definitely has musical connotations and musical utility if we want to use it with the help of music. That means a poem that is composed can also become a song, right? Now, जैसा मैंने कहा, the first thing that we need to remember or keep in mind when we study poems or poetry is something called as the theme. तो पहला बात क्या याद रखेंगे हम लोग? theme. ठीक, जिसको एकदम साधारण भाषा में अगर बोली जाए, अर्थ या फिर मीनिंग, करेक्ट? What is the poem? What does it talk about? What does it represent? Whom does it talk about? So on and so. What is it trying to describe? Correct? इन सब चीज़ों को हम theme कहते हैं. आगे दूसरा क्या है? Again, a very technical aspect of what poetry is all about. It's called as structure. Structure. I don't think I need to describe the meaning of the word structure here. किसी भी चीज़ की बनावट को हम स्ट्रक्चर कहते हैं. लेंथ हो, ब्रेड्थ हो, वॉल्यूम हो, एरिया हो, कुछ भी. तो अभी when we are talking about something so abstract called as poetry or poems, how is it that it has a structure? Of course it does. The thing is, there are certain aspects of a poem which you as 10 plus 2 students probably do not have to read or probably do not have to even remember or use in your daily lives. But then if you go on further to choose literature as a subject in any language, be it in English or Hindi or Sanskrit or whichever language you choose to do your sophomore years, then there you will come across something, these technical aspects with respect to poetry. Okay, and what are they? There are many things. Firstly, there is something called as literary terms. When you talk about literary terms, they are not necessarily terms which are only used in poems. They are used in various other forms of writings, such as drama or plays, novels, short stories, essays, columns, so on and so forth. Having said so, these literary terms, when they come to be used, or when they are taken into consideration, or when they are employed while composing a poem or a piece of poetry, they take different forms, right? And there is also a way how a poem can be measured. A poem can be measured. There is something called as meter. Meter, आप लोगों ने तो देखा ही होगा. A meter, roughly 3 feet in size, is generally used. It is a standard international tool of unit to measure the length of a piece of a cloth, or probably a wooden log or something like that. The same way, meter is another tool which is used in poetry. There are various kinds of meters. I am not going to discuss the meters right now, because that's not important for you right now. Going forward, literary terms and figure of speech. There are literary terms like alliteration. There are literary terms like onomatopoeia. There are literary terms like euphony, cacophony, so on and so forth. These are literary terms. These are used, like I said, in poetry, in plays, in dramas, novels, short stories, in all different forms of writing, in any language. Then, when you're talking about figures of speech, what do you mean by a figure of speech? It is self-explanatory. It goes by its own name. Figure of speech माने जो हम कहते हैं या फिर जो हमारी वचन है, वो वचन का एक फिगर है. ठीक, जैसे आप सोच लीजिए a metaphor और a simile और personification, करेक्ट. ये सारी चीज़ें साधारण स्तर पे कविताओं में या फिर पोएम्स में यूज़ होती हैं, इस्तेमाल की जाती हैं, व्यवहार होती हैं. क्यों? क्योंकि जैसे हम लोग शुरुआती तौर पे मैंने आप लोगों से कहा, अ पोएम इज़ नथिंग बट अ स्टोरी जनरली डिपिक्टेड इन अ वेरी ऑर्नामेंटल फैशन, इन अ स्टाइलिश वे. एंड अ पोएट्री और अ पीस ऑफ पोएट्री डज नॉट नेसेसरीली हैव टू, mark my words, I am being very very specific, a piece of poetry or a poem does not necessarily have to adhere to the strict norms of grammar or structural language or the structure of the language. समझ में आई बात? जैसे सोच लीजिए कि आप लोगों को एक कॉलम दिया गया या एक ऐसे दिया गया, बोला गया कि इस ऐसे को पढ़िए, इस कॉलम को या आर्टिकल को पढ़िए, और उसका एक या उस जो आर्टिकल जो आपने पढ़ा है उसका एक शीर्षक दीजिए या एक टाइटल दीजिए. सोच लीजिए द ऐसे टॉक्स अबाउट, लेट अस से, द एजुकेशन सिस्टम, करेक्ट, और लेट अस से इट टॉक्स अबाउट द यूज़ एंड अब्यूज़ ऑफ सोशल मीडिया. तो आप लोग उसको एक टाइटल दोगे, जिसको जो मन आया वो टाइटल देंगे. तो जब हम टाइटल देते हैं, हम कोशिश जनरली ये हमारी रहती है कि वो शॉर्ट हो और स्वीट हो. एंड व्हेन यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट गिविंग अ टाइटल, or framing a title for a given piece of writing, you do not necessarily have to follow the strict grammatical rules. क्यों? Where you are actually trying to express a feeling which encompasses the overall idea or the gist or the summary of whatever you have read. उसी तरह पोएम में टाइटल से लेकर के एंटायर पोएम में भी जनरली ग्रामेटिकल स्ट्रक्चर को फॉलो करें या ना करें वो पोएट के ऊपर होता है, कवि या कवयित्री के ऊपर होता है, पोएट और पोएटेस के ऊपर होता है जो उस कविता को लिखते हैं. ठीक है ना, स्ट्रक्चर की बात हमने की. देयर इज वन मोर थिंग विच आई वांट ऑल ऑफ यू टू नो. आई एम नॉट गोइंग टू टेल यू समथिंग विच यू डू नॉट नो, यू ऑलरेडी नो इट. इट इज समथिंग कॉल्ड एज राइम और राइमिंग पैटर्न. राइम क्या है? हम लोग जब छोटे छोटे थे, नर्सरी किंडरगार्टन लेवल में हम लोगों को पढ़ाया जाता था नर्सरी राइम्स. ट्विंकल ट्विंकल लिटिल स्टार, हाउ आई वंडर व्हाट यू आर, बाबा ब्लैक शिप, हैव यू एनी वुड. ये सारी जो चीज़ें हैं इनको नर्सरी राइम्स बोला जाता है. अभी नर्सरी राइम्स ही क्यों बोला जाता है? नर्सरी सॉन्ग क्यों नहीं बोला जाता? या नर्सरी पोएट्री या नर्सरी पोएम्स क्यों नहीं बोला जाता? वो इसलिए क्योंकि आपने देखा हो वो ट्विंकल ट्विंकल लिटिल स्टार हो या बाबा ब्लैक शिप हो या जैक एंड जिल वेंट अप द हिल हो, कुछ भी हो, वहाँ पर आपने देखा होगा कि इट साउंड्स वेरी म्यूजिकल टू द ईयर्स एंड द लास्ट वर्ड्स ऑफ एवरी लाइन इट हैज़ गॉट अ म्यूजिकल कॉनोटेशन टू इट. ऑलराइट, जैसे जैक एंड जिल, लास्ट वर्ड क्या हुआ? जिल हुआ. वेंट अप द हिल, लास्ट वर्ड क्या हुआ? सेकेंड सेंटेंस का हिल हुआ. तो जिल और हिल, दे आर टू डिफरेंट वर्ड्स. वन इज द प्रॉपर नेम ऑफ अ गर्ल, a small young girl. Second is hill, a mountain. Correct? Now these are absolutely two different words describing or giving the meaning of two different things. One is an individual, two is an object. Having said so, the pronunciation or at least the sound of it sounds similar, and that is called as a rhyme. And if that rhyme or that pattern of rhyme follows in the entirety of the poem, then we say that there is a particular rhyming pattern in this poem. I would like to give you an example. Correct? There is another beautiful poem at the first year level in the state board, the CHSE board books, the invitation to part 1 book, called as Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, by a very popular poet called as Robert Frost. There, the first stanza begins something like this. It says, whose woods these are, I think I know. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village though. His house is in the village though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. This is the first stanza of this poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. तो मैं क्या बताना चाह रहा हूँ? राइमिंग पैटर्न बताना चाह रहा हूँ. कैसे हुआ है राइमिंग पैटर्न? द फर्स्ट लाइन और द फर्स्ट सेंटेंस ऑफ द फर्स्ट स्टांजा ऑफ दिस पोएम, whose woods these are, I think I know. Now look at the last word. जरा गौर फरमाएं कि हर एक सेंटेंस का लास्ट वर्ड कौन सा है. I think I know, KNOW. ठीक, and try to mark or try to note the pronunciation of this word and the sound that it brings to our ears, right? No. The second one, the second sentence, his house is in the village though. Though, the last word is though, THOUGH. Though. The third word, or the third word that I'm going to tell you, the last word of the third sentence, correct, is he will not see me stopping here. 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 And the fourth sentence, the last word, to watch his woods fill up with snow. SNOW. Now look at these four words. No, though, here, snow. Anyone can see it very, very clearly that there are three words which are pronounced similarly, or the pronunciation of three words of the given four words are similar. No, though, and snow. Correct? Now here is the odd one out. And what is the rhyming pattern here? We can put it this way. The first sentence, second, third, and fourth. Now what is the rhyming pattern? We shall assign any letter or alphabet. Okay, let us assign A to the first sentence. Now the first word or the last word of the first sentence is assigned A. The pronunciation or the sound pattern is assigned as A. Now come to the last word of the second sentence. It is pronounced the same way as the first sentence. And what is it assigned A? So we will assign A here again. Now come to the last word of the third sentence. Here, does it sound like do or no? It does not. So we will assign the subsequent alphabet or the letter that comes after A, called B. Coming to the last sentence and the last word of the last sentence. snow. Again, it sounds like ro and no. So we'll assign the alphabet A, and hence the rhyming pattern is A for this stanza of this poem. For this stanza of this poem, and it does not necessarily have to be followed by every poet in every poem. Again, it does not need to be followed by the same poet in the same poem in its entirety. The poet, if he or the poetess, if he or she so desires or so wills, they can change the rhyming pattern in different stanzas as and when they like. Correct? So this is how a rhyming pattern is constructed or understood. तो ये सारी चीज़ें कुल मिला करके स्ट्रक्चर की बात आपको बताएंगी। और जाहिर सी बात है, बहुत कॉमन क्वेश्चंस भी आते हैं कि एक पोएम में, इस पोएम में कितने स्टांजाज हैं, हर एक स्टांजा में कितने लाइंस हैं, क्या वो यूनिफॉर्म है या नॉन यूनिफॉर्म है, ये आप खुद ही जान सकते हैं। ठीक, लास्ट बट नॉट द लीस्ट, वी विल टॉक अबाउट समथिंग वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. आई यूज अ वर्ड ऑफ माई ओन. ओके, you can use a word of your own too. You are free to do that, because poetry, as they say, very popularly told by a great poet, William Wordsworth, is the spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions recollected in tranquility. So, unless and until there is spontaneity, it is not poetry. And hence, you are free to use your own term. But then this is what I use. Theme के बारे में हम जानें, structure के बारे में हम जानें. The third important thing that we need to keep in mind is feel, which necessarily means sense. Okay? Now, when you read a poem or when you come across a piece of poetry, you definitely get a sense or you definitely get a feel कि भाई ये कविता मैंने पढ़ी और इस कविता को पढ़ने के बाद मेरे मन में भावनाएं क्या आई. ठीक, आप सभी लोग गाना सुनते होंगे, मैं आशा करता हूँ कि सभी सुनते होंगे. I assume, I might be wrong, but I assume that all of us love music, that all of us love to listen to songs, any song, okay? वो किसी भी भाषा में हो, गाना जैसे कहते हैं ना, to each his own. तो मुझे जो गाना पसंद आए वो आपको पसंद आएगा, ज़रूरी तो नहीं, लेकिन फिर भी गाना, संगीत, म्यूज़िक, ये सारी जो चीज़ें हैं बहुत खूबसूरत चीज़ें हैं, दिल को आराम देती है ना, खुशी देती हैं, हंसी लाती है. उसी तरह when you listen to music, it brings a feel along with it. It what should it call? It entices a different kind of an emotion or a sentiment when we listen to music or read poetry. And hence, the most important part to understand poetry is feel, because जब हम poetry पढ़ेंगे, generally उसके दो meaning होते हैं. Number one is the contextual meaning or the literal meaning or the superficial meaning, or you can also go ahead and say the superfluous meaning. यानी जैसे हम पढ़ते हैं कोई चीज़ तो उसका जो अक्षरिक अर्थ होता है उसको हम contextual meaning या literal meaning कहते हैं. और दूसरा मीनिंग क्या होता है? क्रिटिकल मीनिंग. अभी क्रिटिकल मीनिंग क्या है? आपने कविता पढ़ी, अभी सोच लीजिए आप कोई भी गाना उठा लो, लेट अस से जब भी गाना के बारे में बात करते हैं तो गाने याद नहीं आते हैं ना. ओके, आजकल के ज़माने का कोई गाना तो मुझे याद नहीं आ रहा है बच्चे, लेकिन फिर भी हाँ, देयर इज़ दिस ब्यूटीफुल सॉन्ग कॉल्ड चांद तारे तोड़ लाऊं फ्रॉम द मूवी यस बॉस, है ना, शाहरुख खान जी का एक बहुत ही उम्दा सिनेमा है, बहुत मज़ा लगता है सिनेमा देखने से भी. यस बॉस, वहाँ पर एक बहुत ही म्यूज़िकल, बहुत ही खुशी देने वाली एक गाना है. उस गाने का नाम है चांद तारे तोड़ लाऊं. सो व्हेन यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट चांद तारे तोड़ लाऊं, जब आप सुनते हो, जब गाना को सुनते हो तो क्या आता है मन में? एक फीलिंग आता है ना कि मैं, जैसे कि वो जो कलाकार हैं या फिर जो एक्टर हैं, हीरो हैं, या जो भी गाना गा रहे हैं या जिन्होंने ये कविता लिखी हुई है, मैं वो, और मैं क्या बोल रहा हूँ कि चांद तारे तोड़ लाऊं, सारी दुनिया पर मैं छाऊं, बस इतना सा ख्वाब है, ये बोल रहे हैं. सो probably it brings the feeling of, or it brings the emotion or the sentiment of happiness, of desire, of the fighting spirit in life, and so on and so forth, dreams. ठीक? Then there are other songs. Let us say there is this song called as तुमको देखा तो ये ख्याल आया. Alright, that's another beautiful song. I'm quite certain that you have not watched the movie at least. I do not know if you have heard the song or listened to the song. Okay, तुमको देखा तो ये ख्याल आया. Now when you listen to this song, it brings the emotions of, let us say, love. It also brings the emotions of loss in life. Okay, it also brings the emotion of having this want or necessity to have togetherness, friendship in life. ये सारी emotions आते हैं. So why am I talking about it? When you have this feel, okay, and this particular thing called as feel or sense is not identical with every poem. It is absolutely different. आप एक कविता पढ़ेंगे, जैसे मैंने आपको एग्जाम्पल दिया, स्टॉकिंग बाय वुड्स ऑन ए स्नोई इवनिंग. द फीलिंग दैट आई गेट इज इंस्पायरिंग. Okay, maybe when you read the poem, you'll get a different feeling, or maybe you'll get different feelings, right? In plurality. So, sense or feel is absolutely important when we read poetry. ठीक है? तो ये थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा इंट्रोडक्शन मैंने दिया आपको, क्योंकि हम लोग पोइट्री शुरू करने वाले हैं. और यहाँ पर जो पोएम हम पढ़ने वाले हैं, it is written by another very popular American poet. His name is Ted Hughes. Okay, Ted Hughes, T-E-D-H-U-G-H-E-S. Ted Hughes. He is an American poet. Okay, he was born in the United States of America. Pardon me, I do not remember the date of birth of this poet. Having said so, Ted Hughes was married to another fellow poetess. Her name was Sylvia Plath. ठीक, उनका भी एक बहुत खूबसूरत पोएम CHSE के ऑल्टरनेटिव इंग्लिश में है, मिरर. कभी अगर आप लोगों को वक्त हो तो मिरर भी पढ़िए. इट इज़ अनदर वेरी इंस्पायरिंग, वेरी डीपली फिलोसॉफिकल पोएम, राइट? Like the one that we are going to read today. I am going to read the first 3 lines of this poem today, and then we shall continue further in the next lecture. And what is the title of this poem? The title of this poem is The Laburnum Top. The Laburnum Top. आप लोगों ने कभी ये laburnum का बात सुना है? Laburnum की बात. It is actually a tree. The laburnum top. Okay. The laburnum is a deciduous tree. Okay, it's found in deciduous forests, and generally it is found plentifully or abundantly in the North America, the North American continent. Right. So it has got flowers of bright yellow, okay, or canary yellow, whatever, yellow colored flowers, right? And the fruit that it has, when the fruit ripens and it drops off, the seeds of this tree, the laburnum tree, are exceptionally poisonous. They're very, very poisonous, okay? It has got a poison called a cytosine, right? And that's very poisonous. Well, there have been no reported cases of deaths or mortality owing to the consumption of the laburnum seed. Having said so, laburnum tree has beautiful, brightly colored, yellow colored flowers, and its seed is poisonous. So the laburnum top, the poet is talking about the cover, okay, the cover that the tree represents when it is flowering. So of course it has yellow flowers, so when it's covered with yellow flowers, the top of the tree, or the description or the image of the top of the tree, is going to be very beautiful, right? Because it's a very bright canary yellow color. Let's begin. The laburnum top is silent, quite still. In the afternoon yellow September sunlight, a few leaves yellowing, all its seeds fallen. What did I tell you? First we shall talk about the theme of the poem. Along with it, subsequently we will follow by talking about the structure, and then ultimately we will talk about the feel or the sense that this poem brings to us. The laburnum top is silent. अच्छा, बच्चे silent कौन हो सकता है? जो बात कर सकता है वो साइलेंट हो सकता है ना, या फिर जिसकी आवाज़ होती है वो साइलेंट हो सकता है. अभी हैव यू सीन ट्रीज स्पीक? नो यू हैव नॉट, एटलीस्ट फिजिकली. बट देन poets and poetesses, I always say, are crazy people. Okay, in a way, they are people who have actually everyone has a world of his or her own. But then poets and poetesses, they actually have many worlds of their own. So here, the poet is Ted Hughes is trying to say that the laburnum top is silent. Meaning, he is talking about, look at this, the month September, right? Now, in the Northern Americas or the North Americas, September is the month of autumn. Okay. Now, autumn is a season that is generally not prevalent in a hot and humid country or tropical country like ours in India. Probably it comes in people of the northern belt of our country. They experience autumn maybe in Himachal Pradesh or Uttarakhand and Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh. These places probably they experience autumn in its full blossom. But then we do not experience autumn that much. But then what does this season autumn represent? It represents the falling of leaves and flowers, okay, drying up of trees, so on and so forth, so that new leaves are born, newness comes to life. Correct? तो यहाँ पर जब बोला जा रहा है द लबर्नम टॉप इज साइलेंट, क्वाइट स्टिल, मने probably the poet is talking about how it is autumn and the tree is going to shed its leaves and flowers, and it is absolutely alone. It does not have anybody. What does a tree have? Generally it has birds. There are various kinds of fauna found where we see the presence of flora too. हम देखते हैं कि पेड़ों में squirrels रहते हैं, alright, various kinds of small rodents वो रहते हैं, चिड़िया या फिर चिड़िया जो भी हो, these kinds of animals, they generally make their homes on trees. And probably the poet is trying to tell us that the laburnum top is silent because there are no birds, no animals on it. In the afternoon yellow September sunlight, look at this, in the afternoon yellow September sunlight. September, like I told you, is the month of autumn. Okay, leaves and flowers, they fall off trees. Sunlight, of course. Now, is there a color of sunlight? No, light is always colorless, or we can assume that it is white in color. Even then, we can say that sunlight is yellow, right? Because it's very bright, and when we look at the sun, probably it gives us the picture of yellow because of its heat and so on and so forth. So the poet is trying to tell us in the afternoon yellow September sunlight, okay, a few leaves yellowing, all its seeds fallen. A few leaves yellowing, look at this. Yellow is a proper noun, it is the name of a color, but look at the way the poet has beautifully used it to describe a verb, yellowing. Yellowing. So yellow plus ing. What does it mean? I'm trying to give you a hint here. You can use any word to convert it into a verb. This is a noun, and a proper noun at that. Even then, the poet has gone ahead and used it to describe the verb. What is the verb? The verb is the leaves are turning yellow. So instead of using this phrase, leaves are turning yellow, he has said the leaves, a few leaves yellowing, all its seeds fallen. That means all the seeds of the fruits of this laburnum tree just fallen down, and its leaves have started to become yellow. These are the first 3 lines of the poem Laburnum Top. We shall stop here today and resume our session in the next lecture. Okay? Till then, what I wish you to do, what I want you to do is, जो मैंने पहले कहा, कविता क्या होती है, थीम, स्ट्रक्चर, फील, इनके बारे में थोड़ा सा रिसर्च करें, गूगल पे हो या फिर कोई भी जरिया इस्तेमाल करके रिसर्च करें, पढ़ाई करें, एंड देन वी शैल कंटिन्यू विद दिस ब्यूटिफुल पोएम इन द नेक्स्ट सेशन. Hope all of you are doing well. Stay home, stay safe. Good luck and God bless. Thank you.